so that it may be available at a later time, either on our YouTube channel or on our website. And it looks like it's recording. Hello, I'm Jennifer Reed. I'm the president of the Cape Cod Technology Council. Welcome to our coffee chat. We're so thrilled to have you here. If you're new to the Tech Council, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. If you're a member, thank you so much for being a member of our organization. So thrilled to see so many of you here today. I see Dr. Kathy Schatzberg, who's the former president of Cape Cod Community College and my former boss. So welcome. So great to see everyone. We are very excited today to have Samantha Gray with us. She's the lead interpretive ranger for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and we will be getting to have a conversation with her very shortly. But first up, we'd like to give a few housekeeping items. First is, you may notice that I'm not Bert Jackson. Bert is taking some well-deserved time off, so we wish him the best and much deserved, and we'll see him again shortly in the new year, I'm sure. We also have some really great events coming up for you. So first is our ongoing infrastructure meetings that happen on the third Wednesday of every month with our infrastructure chair, Jean Curry. The next meeting is on December 16th at 9 a.m. via Zoom. And those meetings cover a wide range of important infrastructure topics that are related to our Cape Cod region. So we encourage you to attend. Those meetings are free and open to all. And then we have our first Friday in January that will feature Dr. Beth Offenbacher, and she'll be talking about trends in green technology. So we hope to see you for that. And then we have many coffee chats planned for January, some really great ones. We have one with Henry Hall from Mass MEP. We have another one with Will Rubenstein from E4Ever. And we have one planned with Rick and Eric Piney from E-Waste Recycling. And you can find out more information about the specific dates on our website, which is cctechcouncil.org. We are also thrilled. Really, actually, this is a big deal for us to have a new sponsor for these events that we have on Fridays. We are welcoming the Cape and Plymouth Business Media Organization and Dale Shabizian, the CEO and digital strategist. Dale will offer us a tip at these meetings, something to do with business and technology. And so we're really excited to welcome Dale to our organization in this capacity. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to him to have the floor. Welcome, Dale.
Morning, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. As Chris mentioned, I plan to attend these every week. Work gets in the way, and I'm really excited to be able to participate more. If you don't know Cape and Plymouth Business Media, we're a business-focused news organization. We have a monthly publication. Sometimes it's print, sometimes it's digital. We have a pretty large digital following. We're really excited to work with the council because I think just looking at everything that's happening, it's a great organization and we're happy to be here. So my tip is not really related to technology. I actually wanted to go in the reverse direction. So the end of the year is coming up, and what happens? We make resolutions. So there's a speaker I love named Tony Robbins, and he says if you want to change your life, change your business, create something, do something, you have to take what he calls massive action, okay? Sometimes little actions are important, but if you want to get something done, sometimes you have to take this bold or big move. And a critical step in his plan, he says to take massive action, you have to make a plan and you have to follow it. But one of the important steps that I see people miss is they don't have the energy to execute the plan. So my tip is when you're making your goals and your resolutions for this year, allow yourself to have the energy you need to get what you want done, okay? Whether it's in your career, your business, or whatever. That means exercise, fresh air, leaning off the wine at 5 o'clock. I know we've been in quarantine and I hear everyone say it's 5 o'clock, time for a glass of wine, but reducing distractions and drama and just focusing on what we need to do. That's a really important step if we want to achieve our goals for 2021. that's it. Simple.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dale. I appreciate that. Although I think you told us to drink less wine, so I'm not sure I can
I
co-sign
know.
that.
Hey,
Not signing off on that.
it's a tough pill to swallow, but you know, sometimes we have to make sacrifices.
Thank you. So feel free to introduce yourself here in the chat. We'd love to hear where you're from. I'll save the chat at the end so we have a sense of where folks were zooming in from and what organization you may be representing. So thanks and welcome. I'm glad to see so many people chiming in the chat. And now I'd like to hand it over to Robin Orbison. She is a board member of the Tech Council and our programming committee chair and the CEO of Cape Space. Robin?
Okay, thanks, Jen. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Just wanted to, if I do a quick follow-up to what Dale just said, if anybody happened to see the cover of the New Yorker magazine last week, it was the lead article was about how we're all working from home and whether or not we're actually getting anything done. And the cover picture is a woman sitting at a home workstation sipping a martini. So some people aren't waiting till 5 o'clock, apparently. All right. So I am very excited this morning to welcome Samantha Gray. As Jennifer said, she has a wonderful title. She is the lead interpretive ranger for the Army Corps of Engineers assigned to the Cape Cod Canal. And she is going to give us some great information this morning about the Army Corps, how they got to be here, the canal itself, the bridges, and the State of the Union. So with that, I am going to introduce Samantha. Hi, Samantha.
Hi, Robin, and hi, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning. It's wonderful to have you here with us. So let's get right into it. So let's just start off with giving the audience a little opportunity to get to know you. So can you just tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to be involved with the Army Corps of Engineers, and specifically how you ended up involved with the Canal region?
Sure, I'd love to. I should say my story as a park ranger and becoming a park ranger at the Cape Cod Canal is maybe not as circuitous as some other park rangers in the field. For any of you that do know a park ranger, you'll hear tales of jumping from park to park and agency to agency as they build their career. Mine was a little bit more simple. I grew up on Long Island, not too far from New York City. I'm a graduate of Long Island University at CW Post campus. And it was there that I first realized my love for ecology and for studying all these relationships in the natural world and human interaction within the natural world. Growing up in high density suburbia, I didn't really necessarily have that connection. I always had an interest in math, had an interest in education, but I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with that. And it was at college that I realized there was something more. I chose my major in conservation of natural resources purely because I liked what I was studying, not really knowing where the career was going to take me. And it was really just through different volunteer positions and part-time jobs and everything else that I landed a random seasonal job at the Cape Cod Canal. And so I packed up my bags and moved here. And that was in 1996, in the fall of 96. So I really built my career in one spot. I started out in recreation management. So I'll give an overview on what goes on at the Cape Cod Canal shortly. But I was heavily involved with the recreation program. And then as we were developing a visitor center in 2000, I was able to get in on that. And from there, grow my job as an interpretive services and outreach program lead at the canal. And for those of you that don't know what that program is, my job is really just to connect people with what makes the Cape Cod Canal the Cape Cod Canal. It's all about forging those connections. And so we do that through programming and exhibitry and displays.
Well, that is a perfect segue. So what makes the canal the canal? I understand that you have a little slide presentation. I think we're going to let you go ahead and tee that up. and then we'll come back to some more questions.
That sounds great. And Robin, I don't know if I'm going to be able to see the chat as I share my screen and show. So if you see questions coming up, just interrupt me as we go. You don't necessarily have to wait to the end. Okay.
All right, take it away.
All right. Thanks. I'm going to share my window. You let me know when you see it.
We're good.
Okay. Excellent. Well, as mentioned, I'm going to talk quite a bit about the Cape Cod Canal's bridges, but not just about everything you've been hearing in the news. Actually, very little about like what the future is going to be. That's only going to be part of it. I do want to touch upon the past as well as the present. But before I really get into the bridges, I want to talk a little bit more about the Cape Cod Canal itself, the waterway that these bridges span, and also talk a bit about our agency, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and why we are here and involved with these bridges. As you might see by the logo, you see U.S. Army. We do fall underneath the Department of Defense. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is our nation's engineering organization, and it's been around since the time of the Revolutionary War. But we started really getting involved in civil engineering as our country was growing and expanding in the 1800s. Our missions are really broad and really varied. You can kind of see that here on this slide. I'm not going to list everything, but just know if it has something to do with enhancing our nation's security, enhancing our nation's economy, helping our nation to reduce risk from disasters, helping our nation respond to disasters, we may be involved in one way or another. And there's about 35,000 civilians and military members that are part of our agency. Majority are civilian. One of our big engineering responsibilities in the country is to maintain a lot of our nation's navigation infrastructure. When we talk about transportation, I don't know about you, but immediately I think of my car, I think of roadways and bridges. I'll think about railways, think about airways, and not necessarily think about navigable waterways, but that is the bulk of how a lot of our product moves around our country and the world. And there are about 25,000 miles of navigable waterway in the US. The agency I work for, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, maintains about half of our nation's navigation infrastructure. Why do we do that? It's the most economic way with big, heavy stuff. So for those of you that have seen tug and barges go transit the Cape Cod Canal, they might be carrying some sort of petroleum product, say like automotive gasoline. Now, if that gasoline is moving from New York to Boston, one full barge, if we were going to truck it instead, would require more than 350 tanker trucks on I-95. So the economies of scale are there for moving product by water. So that's a big reason why navigable waterways are so important. Cape Cod Canal is really a 17.4 mile piece of this 25,000 mile network of floating product around our nation. For those of you that have biked the Cape Cod Canal, you have not seen the entire 17.4 miles. The land cut itself is about 8 miles in length. The service roads are actually even shorter than that. But the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is responsible for 17.4 miles. That includes a little bit more than 9 miles of approach channel, much of that in Buzzards Bay, a little bit in Cape Cod Bay. And that's so we can maintain a navigable waterway that's at least 32 feet deep by 480 feet wide. And we do that because, well, we want to make sure that we can accommodate vessels of all sizes through the waterway. Now, there are, of course, vessels that are too big to fit through the canal. They are constrained by the depth, the width, as well as the height. The bridges allow for clearance of 135 feet above the water. Most common type of vessel traffic you're going to see for commercial traffic anyway are these tug and barge units like the photograph in the middle. We do see larger vessels like car carriers. If any of you have ever seen one of those go through, they have a clearance of usually less than 10 feet between the bottom of the bridges and the top of that vessel. They are really large. There's about 7,500 of the large commercial traffic that go through the canal. The rest of that is your smaller motor traffic, like the recreational boat that you see there. The main reason why the Cape Cod Canal here is to provide a safe shortcut. It saves an average of 135 miles of coastal travel between New York and Boston. Any of you from the C&D Canal area, I'm really sorry. I just realized I forgot to show that exists right there. Sorry about that. But navigation is not the only mission the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has at the Cape Cod Canal. Our other missions include environmental stewardship, recreation, and actually flood risk management. There are a little bit more than 1,150 acres of federal land that surround the navigable waterway. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is tasked with serving as stewards of the natural resources that are on federal lands and waters. We also open up our lands and waters for recreation, and we do see about 3 million people every year in visitation. Primary interests are access to our service roads that line the canal for whether that's biking, walking, running, or access to shoreline fishing. The park ranger, the natural resource management staff, so employees like myself are responsible for the stewardship and the recreation along the canal. And as you can imagine, the recreation is another economic driver besides the economic benefits of having a navigable waterway. By having a free, open federal a public space for people to recreate also helps bring people to this region. But some of the staff along the Cape Cod Canal are also responsible for operation of 2 hurricane barriers here in New England. We have a structure in New Bedford and another one in Providence, Rhode Island, that's called Fox Point Hurricane Barrier. And these are structures that were built in the 1960s. And those are maintained and staffed during high water events. And those structures will close and pumps will run to help prevent flooding in those cities. Now, to achieve the navigation mission, the stewardship mission, the recreation mission, the flood management, flood risk management mission, we have about 50 employees at the Cape Cod Canal that are full-time. We do bring on seasonal staff in the summer to help us. Some of the employees are marine traffic controllers. They do work around the clock. This is a 24-hour day operation. Our main office is on Academy Drive in Buzzards Bay, and it's from there that all vessel traffic is monitored throughout the waterway, and any vessel over 65 feet in length their movement is coordinated through. Our marine traffic controllers use an integrated control system that includes AIS, that's a large screen up here. It's an automatic identification system. So they're able to get advance notice of when vessels are traveling up and down the eastern seaboard, where they might meet, when they might enter, so they can help coordinate the movement of these vessels passing each other in time with the tide, the weather, as well as the movement of the railroad bridge and movement of other vessels. We also have a technology along the waterway that allows us a complete picture of what's going on. So we have cameras, we have radar equipment, and we also have tide and weather equipment at various locations. And that all comes together so one person in one room full of lots of technology can monitor the entire waterway and beyond, really, at once. And then we have communications, of course. So some of the staff that we have at the canal actually work in the control center as marine traffic controllers, and some of the staff we have are part of our electronics crew, and it is their job to make sure that all of this technology works. Some of my coworkers work on the waterway. They are part of our marine operations staff, and they operate patrol boats year-round. And their job is to inspect our facilities, make sure there's no obstructions to navigation, to enforce rules and regulations, and to render assistance when mariners get into trouble. So they are kind of out in the field and ready also to be dispatched by the marine traffic controllers if there were to be an incident. My other coworkers are involved with helping to maintain the navigation infrastructure. For any of you that have been along the canal at night or even cross the bridges at night, there's a lot of light bulbs out there. Well, we have a high voltage electrical crew that are responsible for power distribution and lighting along the canal. So we have navigation lights every 500 feet along the waterway. We have lights on top of bridges, along the bridges, and this small crew of electricians make sure that everything is running properly. And then we also have some staff that will do some of the maintenance of our facilities along the waterway. Anything bigger, we do contract that out. We do have 8 full-time park rangers plus our park manager. And our job is to manage the natural resources along the canal and the recreation areas. So we have multiple day use areas where people can then access the service roads. We have a visitor center that was full of exhibits and programming that's normally open May through October when it's not COVID. We have rangers that patrol the canal year round, inspecting facilities, reporting to incidents and accidents. And again, we're in charge of all of the shoreline management as well. And so that's a bit of an overview, just really what's going on in the day-to-day operations and what our staff is doing here. That of course includes administrative support staff. We do have engineers here, but when we get involved with the bridges, we will go beyond our project office and tap into the resources that exist regionally through our district office in Concord, Massachusetts. And that's where we have engineering and planning and staff that are very specific to working on some of the bigger projects like the bridges. Now, this canal, of course, has not always been here. It opened in 1914, making us 106 years old. What used to be in this valley were a couple of rivers, the Scusset River, and this longer one that connected to Buzzards Bay was called the Monument River when the canal was constructed. It had other names prior to that. There's a little snapshot of what the Monument River looked like. Give you an idea of where this is. If you are familiar with a street in Bourne called Old Bridge Road, it is called Old Bridge Road because it connected to this old bridge that went over the river. Though people talked about building a canal through this valley between Cape Cod Bay and Buzzards Bay, as early as the 1600s, first engineering survey was done during the Revolutionary War. It really wasn't until the 1800s that people really started pushing for a canal and studying it. And one of the big reasons why they wanted a canal was because of all the shipwrecks that were occurring along the outer shores of Cape Cod. So it was a big push to have a canal here to allow mariners to avoid these dangerous outer shores and prevent, the heartache and all the challenges associated with all the shipwrecks. There were a few attempts in the late 1800s, but it wasn't until the early 1900s that the canal was actually constructed. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was not involved with the original construction of the canal. Instead, it was a private company financed by August Belmont Jr. Lead engineer was William Barclay Parsons. They broke ground in 1909. They utilized dredges to dig from either end towards the middle. They used both hydraulic dredges that would basically suck the material up like a giant vacuum cleaner. And the material would either go onto scows or via pipeline and fill in areas along the side. Or they used dredges, mechanical dredges, like you see here. They ran into lots of problems, as you might imagine, including large boulders. So there's a lot of dynamiting occurring during the canal construction. And in that dry section in the middle of the land cut, they utilized steam shovels and railroad cars to remove that material. So along both sides of the canal in that midsection, there is sandy material that was removed from where there is now a canal. 5 years of digging. Opening day was 1914. Big party, as you might imagine. If for any of you that are now curious, the canal opened in 1914, but our bridges are actually only, they opened in 1935. Does anyone know how people got on and off Cape Cod between 1914 and 1935?
No, tell us.
Well, I know a lot of people guess that there was a ferry. And if they do guess that, they are correct. This ferry actually existed in the Bournedale area, so right near where the herring run is today. So the people of Bournedale could get to the train station, which used to be, well, where a canal is, but it was moved to the Cape side. But this was not the only way. There were bridges prior to the bridges we have today. Our bridges have been around since 1935. They were not the original bridges that span the Cape Cod Canal. The Bourne and Sagamore bridges were rolling bascule double leaf lift bridges. What does that mean? They were drawbridges. And rolling bascule means they had counterweights at the base of those leaves right there. And that helped that balance as they pivot open and closed. These were pretty neat. They had, their roadway was oak planking, just like you would see on your floor. And the Bourne Bridge actually had a trolley that allowed people to travel between New Bedford and Monument Beach. In the closed position, is about 40 feet above sea level. So smaller boats could go without it having to open. But a lot of times those bridges would have to open for vessels to transit. Like I said,
Samantha, I just want to say, it looks like we have an expert hiding here in the audience. Rob guessed correctly, Rob Cushing, that about the drawbridges. And he also said you can still see the remains of the original Sagamore Bridge on the Cape side of the canal bike trail.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Thank you so much. Great job, Rob. So yes, you can. You can actually see old abutments for both the Sagamore and the Bourne. If you're biking along the Cape side of the canal, there is the Sagamore Bridge abutment is in, it's kind of near Pleasant Street. Atlantic Design is nearby, and you'll see an A-framed house built upon what looks like a retaining wall, and that's the old abutment of the Sagamore Bridge. If you are along the mainland side of the canal, between the railroad bridge and the Bourne Bridge, a little bit closer to the Bourne, you're going to see a big wall, looks like a retaining wall, with a mural painted on it. It's really close to where Bourne Town Hall is. As a matter of fact, it's just right down the street, and that is the old Bourne Bridge abutment. So awesome, thank you. Yeah, both these bridges were very similar in design. And when you think about why and how bridges are designed, you got to think about the volume and type of traffic that was using it. In 1914, not a lot of people had automobiles. And the automobiles that were used were lighter and smaller than the ones that we have today. So this was not, this is kind of an unthinkable design for a bridge that we'd want spanning the Cape Cod Canal today, but back in 1914, it was not. If you're curious what this structure is by the old Sagamore Bridge, there was a large manufacturing facility in Sagamore at the time of the canal's opening called Keith Car Works, and they made railroad cars. They were a huge employer. They had, I think at their peak, something like 1,400 employees. And then there were some other bridges that span the early canal, but really it was just during the canal construction. This is an old temporary wooden bridge that was in place until this Sagamore Bridge was completed, which was in 1913. And then if you're curious, the railroad bridge also looked different. A trunnion bascule, a bascule has the counterweight. You can see that here, but with the trunnion, it was, there's a pivot point here. So this, and then when it tilted up, the weight was over the pivot point, the way it tilted up and down. And that replaced an old beam style rail bridge that crossed over the old river. The opening for all these bridges was about 140 feet wide. Just to give you a perspective, the opening for all of our bridges now is 550 feet wide. So these were definitely smaller bridges. The canal was smaller back then. So this is an aerial photograph, the black and white one, of what the Cape Cod Canal looked like in the 1920s versus this aerial photograph, the colored one, was taken in the 1910s. The original Cape Cod Canal was a much smaller waterway. The channel was only 100 feet wide. The sides were very irregular. There was actually a lot of problems in the early canal. Erosion was a big problem. Swift current with the narrow openings was a big problem. This incident happened in 1919, where the steamship completely missed the opening of the Sagamore Bridge and crashed underneath its approach. There were complaints that the bends in the canal were a problem, and that there was traffic at this point. Having drawbridges in the 1920s, by the end of the 1920s, a lot more people had automobiles, and you were starting to have traffic buildups. So we've been getting complaints about traffic crossing our bridges since the 20s. So what happened with all these problems? Well, the original company that had the canal, who hoped to make money on tolls, they never saw the profit that they had hoped for. And financially, it was failing. They sold the canal to the government. The government was able to purchase it under the River and Harbors Act of 1927. And they officially took over in March 31st, 1928, and tasked the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to fix it. So it was from that moment on that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers officially assumed responsibility for the Cape Cod Canal and everything that came with it, including the bridges. From that moment on, it was first starting to identify all the problems and start coming up with solutions to deal with swift currents and bends. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers decided they were just going to make a much wider and deeper waterway than Belmont's canal was. They contracted with MIT to build a large model, the engineers down there, a large model of the waterway to test it. The Corps also decided to change the approach channel in Buzzards Bay. Today, as you're coming up Buzzards Bay, you have a nice straight approach heading into the land cut. In the original canal, you actually came as a mariner into Phineas Harbor, turn left behind Mashney Island, which was a real island back in the day, turn right, and then head in by Taylor's Point to continue on. So that was completely eliminated. Islands were cut in half, and the straight approach was created. So all of this was going on in the 1930s. You can see in the photograph of the dredge, what happened in the 1930s? Well, it was the time of the Great Depression. So all of this work, the goal was to keep the canal open for business while all this work was happening. So new sides of the canal were laid. Employees came along to lay riprap to prevent the erosion, and then dredges came along to dig out the old sides of the canal. Now you see in this photograph, the bridges were already constructed. So before the whole canal realignment happened, the bridges were replaced. In 1933, the National Industrial Recovery Act was passed. This is your New Deal Act. This was all about putting people back to work. And the Cape Cod Canal project got $4.6 million to build 3 new bridges, and we employed a little over 700 local people to construct bridges. It was at this time that the railroad, the Bourne, the Sagamore, all built simultaneously. They worked in teams, constructing from one end to another. This larger aerial photograph shows the old Sagamore Bridge and then the current one that we have in place today. These buildings in between and beyond are what remains of Keith Car Works in 1935. They had closed their doors for business for good in 1929. What I love about this photo, and actually if there are other photos that's showing the Bourne and the railroad, there's a brief moment in 1935 where you'll see 6 bridges over the Cape Cod Canal because the old bridges were not dismantled until the new ones were in place. Some neat photos of the bridges being constructed. Here is a series of the railroad bridge under construction. As I mentioned earlier, the waterway remained functional as much as possible during the construction. So to build the railroad bridge, teams worked in either end towards the middle. They built the towers, started building the span towards the center. And it was not until the very end, in 1 week, they had to close the canal for traffic, and they built the last 6 panels of the center span and then raised it for the first time. And you can see that here. Railroad bridge, first train rolled over in December of 1935. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is responsible for the operation and maintenance of this bridge as well. We have about 1,000 moves a year. What I kind of love with this bridge is that center span, 544 feet long, takes about 2.5 minutes for it to lower, weighs 2,200 tons, and then 2.5 minutes for it to rise back up for vessel traffic. That 2,200 ton hunk of steel that moves costs us less than $1 in electricity for a round trip move. I bet you somebody knows how it works. See if someone puts it in the chat. I'm going to show that right there. If you're wondering what's in the rooms at the top of the towers, they're giant shivs or giant pulleys. And around them are cables that connect on one end to the span, another other end, large counterweights. These are concrete filled steel, and the 2 of them, there's one in each tower, equal the weight of the span. So this bridge works primarily with shivs and with counterweights.
So we did, Samantha, we did have a couple of guesses here. One of them was counterbalances. Bruce, thank you. And cantilevers.
Nice. Well, the counterbalance was the key right there. Nice. All right. So here's the Bourne Bridge under construction. And as you can see, again, teams working from either end towards the middle. You know, a lot of people look at our bridge and wonder, well, what style are our highway bridges? Because you see the truss work. So we do have continuous truss that goes from the abutment. The big concrete structures at the end are called abutments. They're kind of serve as bookends and hold the structure together. You have a continuous truss. It goes from one end to the other. You can't quite see the other end here. You have a roadway. It's a through truss, in that the roadway sits on top of the truss, goes through, and then under. You have an arch. But then you also have, I don't know how many of you realize, when you're actually over the water, the segment of the road that's right here is under suspension. So the roadway, when you're over the water, is being suspended from the arch. So this is a continuous through truss arch suspension bridge, I guess we would call it. But again, there's just some really neat shots of the bridge, the Bourne Bridge being constructed. And the type of work that was going on then looks different than today. There was no OSHA. There was no EPA. I look at some of these photos and just the ladders coming up and all these people working on these forms without fall protection. It was amazing that throughout the entire canal's reconstruction in the 1930s, there was only 5 deaths. Now, we wouldn't tolerate any in today's standards, but in the 1930s, it was expected that for every million spent, there'd be, at least 1 death. And so amazingly, with the 5 deaths, we were under the national average of what was happening then. There's a lot of rumors that there are people buried in some part of some concrete of one of the bridges. That is a rumor that is for, I think, every large structure that was constructed during this time frame. I have no record of that occurring. So if anyone has one, you can let me know. By June 22nd, 1935, the bridges were ready for opening, and that's when the opening day ceremony happened. Well, here, let's do another trivia, and I'll give you a moment to respond. I'm featuring a picture of the Bourne and the Sagamore bridges, but do you know which one is which? Can you tell me which one the Sagamore bridge is? Is it the one on top or bottom? So you could just write top or bottom for the Sagamore. Write a question mark if you have no idea.
Okay, bottom. We're getting most of the couple tops. So far, more bottoms guesses than tops.
All right. Well, then you have a very smart crowd. You are correct. The Sagamore is the one on the bottom. There's a few ways to know. If you're really familiar with the area, you might just know from the topography. But if you don't know, you could just look at the structure itself. The Bourne Bridge is about 1,000 feet longer than the Sagamore Bridge. So if you look at the photograph on the bottom, you're going to see a concrete pier in the water. There's one on the other side, and then a short approach span, and then the abutment. On the Bourne Bridge, you have a much longer approach. So there's going to be 3 sets of piers on each side of the waterway. I can't see this because of the tree, before you get to the abutment. Reason why the Bourne Bridge is so much longer than the Sagamore is because the Sagamore is built into hills. If our goal, the engineer's goal, was to have a clearance of 135 feet for vessels underneath, then they only needed a short approach to get vehicles up that high. On the Bourne Bridge, the land is very flat, very close to sea level. They needed a longer approach to get there. So a little bit of trivia for you. All right, so here we are. Our bridge is completed in 1935. What does that make us? 85 years old this year. We see about 35 million vehicle trips over the bridges this year, though according to the Cape Cod Times article, we were down from that this year. Less people were traveling, more people working from their computers. But on average, 35 million vehicle trips every year on these bridges. Considering their age and their usage, as you might expect, we need to do a lot to keep our bridges functional. How do we do that? Well, we inspect them and we maintain them. As far as inspections go, we have inspections that happen once every 2 years, where you have people within arm's length of every critical piece of the bridge. Once every 5 years, we'll do diving inspections where they're inspecting underneath the water. This past fall, you may have seen people climbing on the Bourne Bridge, kind of looking like this photo of the Sagamore Bridge. We had inspectors on the Bourne Bridge this fall, and we also had a dive team that inspected all 3 bridges this fall. So inspections were done this year on above ground on the Bourne, underwater on all 3. They're looking for everything from failed paint, rust, corrosion, section loss, cracks, bending. You see everything here. So anything that looks out of place. That's really important because based on what they find there, also based on our budgetary cycle and based on best practices for preventative maintenance, that's when we schedule our maintenance. And there is an average schedule of when this is going to happen, when we're going to do our paint and our steel repairs, when we're going to work on the concrete, when we're going to work on expansion joints, do electrical upgrades, bridge bearings, just to give you an idea. Some things that I know are coming up, I believe that on the, let's see, on the Bourne Bridge this year, some of the lighting on the Bourne Bridge still needs to be converted over to LED. So we should be seeing some of that work going on this year. I believe there's going to be some minor steel repairs on the Sagamore Bridge coming up in the next year or 2, as well as repair to a couple of the light stanchions, so involving some steel repairs. Give you an idea, again, some of the maintenance work that's done. This is an example of a painting job where we set up containment and then scaffolding within that containment. So that folks inside can work on removal of the old paint system, quick inspection, any repairs that need to be done, and then putting on the multi-paint system back on. And all that, it has to be done fairly rapidly to prevent any sort of flash rusting from occurring. And this is all pretty complicated because it's done at heights, it's done above traffic. Only certain sections can be done at a time. You can't tarp the whole bridge at once. Otherwise, that can affect the structural integrity of the bridge. Next paint jobs that are happening might not be as entailed as the last few paint jobs we've had, because we're going to be looking more towards the future and not trying to maintain bridges for decades, because we are going to be looking towards replacement. So our painting in the next few years might involve more spot painting versus a complete painting job that you see. Other work.
I'm gonna interrupt you right here. We've got a lot of questions coming in, and
Great.
we've got about 15 minutes left. So
Okay.
how would you like to do this? Do you have a few slides you want to finish up, or
yeah, let me do a few slides and then let's do that, because what I would like to talk about is in the future, right? Because I bet you a lot of those questions.
Yeah. Great.
A lot of those questions are about the future. Okay, so for those of you that are not familiar, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers just completed a major rehabilitation evaluation study. It's a mouthful, but basically that's a study that an engineering study that we need to do if we anticipate in the years to come that we're going to need to do a major job on the bridges, which we will need to do. Our bridges are designed that basically every 50 years, you either need to do a major rehab or replace them. And so by doing this study, you're comparing the cost benefits of doing a rehab or replacement. To give you an idea what a rehab looks like, for those of you that lived in the area in the late 70s and early 80s, we did a major rehab of both highway bridges. And this is a photograph of us working on the Bourne Bridge. So you are removing the entire decking, doing repair to the stringers and the beams, the steel work underneath, putting the deck back on, major concrete work. You're doing a major rebuild, essentially, of your bridges. It was determined that this really was not the best way forward for multiple reasons. One, when you start looking at the money that's going to go in, the time it's going to take to do this type of work. Back in the 1970s and 80s, we could close a whole bridge and detour people to the other side. We really can't do that kind of work now, so it would take longer to do. Because of the age of the bridges, we anticipate having to do multiple. And then in the end, you still have bridges that were designed for less vehicles than what we have today, designed for smaller vehicles than what we have today. And it basically doesn't meet any highway standards, including a divided highway, the lane width, having divided space for pedestrians and cyclists. So the recommendation came out that we have new bridges that include a real divider, something that meets current day highway standards of 13 feet wide, having merge lanes, shoulder lanes, and real bike and pedestrian paths. Now, we expect that this is going to cost about $1 billion to do. A lot of people want to know, well, what are our new bridges going to look like? But of course, we are not at this phase yet. We just made the determination this spring that we're going to replace it. Right now, we're really in the design and development and permitting phase. Still need to identify exactly where the funding is coming from. It was agreed that it would be federal funding, but that has not been secured yet. Project delivery method, that has been decided. Mass DOT will be taking the lead on that. And that came out through a memorandum of understanding that was signed on July 7th. And since then, Mass DOT has contracted with an engineering firm, and they've been doing ongoing surveys of everything that is in place currently in terms of roads and utilities, and coming up with a determination on exact location and size of the bridges. And that will be kind of a first phase. Next phase they'll be working on will involve, a preliminary design. And then after that gets to the big contract where they'll do a final design and construction. There will be public input as those phases continue. And the goal is to have this going on before significant repairs are required. So there's not an exact timeline yet, because also funding has not been secured yet. But as we start getting into, I want to start answering questions in a moment, but I do want to let everybody know that there are, if you wanted to know more about the study that was done, you can read the entire thing at this website, CapeCodCanalBridgesStudy.com. But if you want to keep up to date with what's going on, you want to go to mass.gov's website and look up the Canal Area Transportation Improvement Program, because this is where everything will be involving the replacement of the Bourne and Sagamore bridges and all the leader roads to it. And then I'll just throw my email here so you can always follow up with me later. At that point, I just want to stop sharing the screen so I can see some of the questions coming in and answer them.
Great.
Okay.
That was amazing. What awesome photos you have. There's going to be available in a museum or a library somewhere?
Yes. Yeah, so some of the images are currently available at the Cape Cod Canal Visitor Center. We weren't able to, that's in Sandwich, we weren't able to open this year because of COVID, hopefully next year. And I'll be working on getting more out there for the public to be able to see virtually.
Fantastic.
So stay tuned.
I'm just going to say, so we're at the 5-minute mark here, and there's a lot of questions. So we're willing to stay on for an extra 10 minutes or so if you are. Is that okay with you, Samantha?
Yes, yes. Sorry for going over.
Okay, great. So then let's just get to some of these questions. All right. So first question here. There's one question here. You were talking about the canal, the early days of the canals. Question is, were there other canals for the Bass River and Canal Road in Orleans?
Yes, so that's a great question. History-wise, the very first Cape Cod Canal was in Orleans, and that was a very small little waterway that was used during the War of 1812, and it went through Rock Harbor. So imagine it kind of cutting through where the Orleans Rotary is today. In 1824, when our nation was in the big canal building boom, federal government did multiple surveys for canals in this region, and it included one through the Bass River.
Okay. Question. One of the hurricanes caused the Bass River to nearly connect Cape Cod Bay to Nantucket Sound. Was there ever any concept to use Bass River as a canal? I think maybe you just answered that, but there's a comment here that it would have been less digging.
It would have been less digging, but it didn't allow you to avoid all of the tricky shoaling in waters through Nantucket Sound. So the cost benefit, they did not go with that one.
Okay. Question from Steve. Will work related to bridge replacement include any approach modifications that will mitigate beach erosion, particularly in Sandwich?
The beach erosion in Sandwich, dealing with Town Neck Beach, is something that is looked at completely separately than what's going on with the bridges and the feeder roads with that. There is currently a Section 111 study that I believe is under final review. And that will involves, the Corps of Engineers and basically kind of calculating, analyzing, quantifying the impact of the navigation infrastructure to the erosion that's occurring on Town Neck Beach, and then mitigation measures associated with that. So I believe that Section 111 study is in final review. So that's a whole separate job than the bridges and connector roads. Yeah, but it's happening.
Probably a whole separate session on beach erosion. Next question. Is there a plan to replace the railroad bridge? We always talk about the car bridges.
Sure. Yeah, the railroad bridge is the same exact age, and so you wonder why. That one is not part of this plan. The railroad bridge did undergo its major rehab right around 2000, 2001. I think it was like 2000 to 2003. Over those multiple years, it just went through a major rehab. So at this time, it's not being looked at for major rehab or replacement.
Okay. Someone's asking here, has anyone ever collided with the bridges? I guess, has anybody ever, driven their boat into part of the bridges? Does that happen?
We've had small impacts, yeah, but nothing that shut down the bridge. But yeah, if a situation were to happen, it's at that point that the Marine Traffic Controller calls an engineer right away, calls the state police because they're dealing with traffic, and we get someone doing structural analysis. So you can YouTube a video. It was a few years ago. A cruise ship was going through the canal, and underneath the Bourne Bridge, its communication antenna scraped the bottom of, no, the railroad bridge, sorry, and you see sparks and everything like that. So so if you like seeing things like that, you can watch it. But there was no structural damage to it, just a little scuffing. And problems for the ship.
All right, that's great. Somebody's asking if they wanted to see the inspection reports. Do you make those available to the public?
That's a great question. I have no idea. But if you post my email and they want to follow up, I can try and answer that for them specifically. But
okay,
I don't know what's public document, what's a Freedom of Information Act document, and what would be not given out because of security. But I have no idea. Sorry.
Okay, all right. So Samantha, we'll get back to you on that one. So there's a question here from Felicia that I'm not quite sure I follow the question. So I'm going to ask Felicia to unmute. You have a question here about ACE selling bridges. Could you just clarify your question?
Yeah, it was my understanding that the Army Corps of Engineers didn't own the bridges anymore, and they weren't going forward, et cetera. So I'm not sure what's what, but maybe you could expound on some of that.
Sure, I'd love to clarify that. So the bridges that we have today will remain under the responsibility of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers until they no longer exist. The new bridges, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation will be responsible for the construction of those new bridges. And upon completion, responsibility for maintaining bridges over the canal, at least those new ones, those new highway bridges, not the railroad, will be the responsibility of the state. But the old ones will be forever the federal responsibility till they're gone.
Okay.
Question. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you. Question here from Yuki. Can you just talk about whether or not you've addressed sustainable energy being incorporated into the design of the new bridges?
That will be something that is incorporated, as well as climate change. So any large engineering project will incorporate climate change. So perhaps sea level rise, people want to know if the bridges will be higher. As far as for navigation benefits, it wouldn't matter because the railroad bridge stays the same, but they might become higher because of anticipated sea level rise. That sustainability are all things that would be incorporated, but I don't have any details yet of what that means specifically. That'd be something definitely to follow on the Mass DOT website.
Okay. Okay. Well, wait, here's one more coming in. Okay, I think that covers everybody's questions. We actually got it in with only a minute or two over. So Samantha, I'm going to give you the last word here. Is there anything else that you would like people to understand about the Army Corps and the bridge and canal region?
I should have had a prepared, closing
covered a lot, so.
I guess first and foremost, we are here to serve the people of our nation, of our community, and our region. It's very clear and understandable. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers are doing these projects within a region to support the region. So first and foremost, we are there for that support. We are there for the public, and just to know that we're multifaceted. So though people might only know us for the bike paths, which are really our service roads for maintaining the infrastructure, there is so much going on. And I definitely encourage all of you to continue exploring and learning more about what we do locally and beyond.
Okay, that is wonderful. Samantha, thank you. We're getting a lot of comments here about people just really enjoying this presentation and feeling that they have a much more well-rounded understanding of a very important part of our local region. Thank you so
That's
much.
great.
Thank you for being with us this morning. I do believe you've already dropped your email into the chat. Is that correct?
I dropped it for
No.
her.
Yeah,
I dropped it
you
for
can-
her. But feel free to put it in there again, Samantha, but if you just scroll up, or if you save the chat, you can certainly do that if you'd like. You just click those three little dots at the bottom and anyone can save the chat. Also, if anyone would like to share this presentation with colleagues, friends, family, I know lots of us that grew up around here are very fascinated with the bridges. I know I certainly am. Feel free to email me and I'd be happy to send you the link to this recording. Samantha, thank you so much for your time. This was fascinating. And thanks to everyone that was here today. Again, we'd love to have you as a member of the Cape Cod Technology Council. And if you enjoyed your experience today, please let a friend or a colleague know about us. And we hope to see you soon at a future event. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Samantha.
Have a great weekend.